long time. Very often he comes to my department in different capacities, and it is my proud privilege to introduce Professor K. Kameswar Rao before you. Professor Rao did his MSc in the year 1979 from Agra University and PhD in the year 1995 from Agra University, Andhra University, and he has more than 35 years of teaching and research experience, and also having with more than 30 years of administrative experience. He specialized in environmental impact assessment and environmental audit, and also having large knowledge in environmental planning and system analysis, forest and wildlife management. Professor Rao has guided successfully 39 PhD students, and he has published more than 50 papers in the Journal of National and International Reports. He has also completed 12 reports and authored 3 books. He has also completed 6 projects during his teaching career in Andhra University in Environmental Science Department. The project sponsored by Ministry of Forest and Environment, UGC, SPWD, then Ford Foundation, and many others. Right now, he is a member of Government of India, Ministry of Forest and Environment, Climate Change expert member. And he is also very recently, he has joined as an adjunct professor in Central University, Koraput, Odisha. With this brief introduction, now I request Professor Kameswar Rao to deliver his lecture. And for your information, today he will deliver one lecture, and during the same time, tomorrow he will be delivering another lecture. One on environmental impact assessment and another on environmental movement and people's participation. I hope all the participants will enjoy his talk. Thank you. Now I request Professor Rao to please start.
Thank you, Professor Sahu, and a very good morning to all my teacher colleagues who have joined this HR Human Resources Development course. I think today we are going to discuss about one of the most important topics, in the sense that the future generations are dependent on. That is about how India is conducting its environment protection and environmental safeguards for the future generations. For this process, I believe that all of you are aware that the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change under the Government of India have framed certain guidelines that all developmental projects involving land or resources and other vital ecological aspects should have prior environmental clearance from the Government of India. This was established under the Environmental Protection Act of 1986, and this prior environmental clearance concept was introduced from 94. So since 94, all big projects or industries or mines or construction projects or area development projects, the Indian government is giving environmental clearance, assuming that they will all follow all environmental conditions to ensure the safety of environment. So to a certain level, we can say that it is a good beginning, but unfortunately, in this process, the role of teachers and the role of the experts was very much limited to a certain thing. So what we find is the participation of the teachers and the educated elite in this process was very low. So my choice for this lecture is that environment is such a field, it is a cross-boundary field. Here, it is to be assessed in terms of not just physics or chemistry or biology or ecology, but economics, cultural, social, and other aspects of human importance like health, economy. And all these need to be considered as impacts of the project on the environment. So what is happening so far is in the past 30 years, we have involved only engineers and some specialized scientists, or maybe one or two economists or something, sociologists and so on. But throughout the process, we did not involve at every stage the real experts that we required as far as the social and the environmental and ecological aspects are concerned. Even ecologists were there in that process. So that's the reason why I wanted to draw attention all of these faculty members and the different teachers of different specializations to this lecture, and I'm calling it very important because the future of our children and their children's environment is dependent on this process only. So now let me share a small presentation about the entire process. I'm sure most of you are aware of it, but for those who are not aware of it, it could be a preamble to begin with how this process is important and how we should involve ourselves in preparing the human resources for the country. So let me share my presentation now. Just give me 1 minute of time. Yeah. Is it visible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Sir, visible, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this information. Right. Well, this is about the state of environmental impact assessment. And this is popularly called as EIA process. EIA process. And this was brought into the mainstream in India. You have in 94 for the first time, but we have revised this process in 2006. If you look at the genesis of this project, Environmental Protection Act of 1986 was introduced in India with an experience learned from, well, the Stockholm Conference at 1971, in the 1971, and later on a series of discussions on the international discussions on the environment. And when Bhopal gas tragedy occurred in 1984, India found that it has no suitable law to sue the culprits, resulting in we could not justify and bring to the book about the culprits in a proper way and could get proper compensation and could get proper remediation. And in 1986, this Environmental Protection Act was implemented. And as per this act, protects the environment and also framed rules in the same year how this act need to be implemented. So this act has become a major tool now in safeguarding our environment for us and for children and for their children and for the future generations. While introducing this act again, even the Indian Constitution was amended. Under Article 21, the environment was brought as one of the major aspects that the Constitution should protect. And then they have introduced two articles, 48G, directing all governments to do all measures and educate the citizens for doing their duties in environmental protection and safeguarding the environment. Here, environment includes wildlife, natural landscapes, natural resources, and everything. And similarly, Article 51AG was introduced again. As a fundamental duty, all citizens need to fulfill their duties to safeguard the environment and protect the environment. Based upon these fundamental responsibilities or duties, environmental education has been introduced to make the citizens environmental conscious right from the school stage to the PG level. And at all levels, environmental education was introduced. But unfortunately, that's a different story. We have not assessed the impact of that environmental education. Why? Because from school to almost PG level, everybody is studying about ozone and pollution and something like that, but nobody is conscious about their environmental duties, how to throw the waste, how to use plastic, how to this one. All these were not educated through these textbooks. So that's a different story. But what I'm trying to drive you at is the Constitution gives immense powers for the environment, and for environmental protection, if it is necessary for the future generations, you can even prohibit a law or this one and amend it for the future generations in such a way. Okay, using the section 5 of this environmental protection rules in 86, for the first time, environmental impact assessment notification was issued. This notification says that all major industrial or mineral or land or energy developmental activities, before they are starting the project or before the project is conceived, they have to assess the environmental impacts, how this project affects the environment, and demonstrate or submit these assessments to the government and obtain prior environmental clearance. Why we call prior environmental clearance is because the clearance is obtained before the project is initiated. So this is a case not just in India itself. It is there in many countries as an internationally agreed obligation under Rio Declaration of 92. So India also has introduced in 94, and after almost 10 years or nearly 8 years of experience or 15 years of experience of EIA notification of 94, India has revised this notification in 2006, enhancing its scope to more projects, like even building construction projects or area development projects and many other projects in that way. So if it is a building construction project of a large scale, or an industry, or a major foundry, or any activity that involves in changing the landscape by 50 hectares or more, or maybe a river valley project where you are going to construct a dam or a reservoir or a hydel project or whatsoever it is, all these attract prior environmental clearance. And so this act, this prior environmental clearance, construction of new projects or activities, or all those projects which were established much before this notification, if they are going for expansion or modernization or activities listed in that notification schedule, saying that change of technologies or change of the areas and so on, or capacity addition, and all these require this prior environmental clearance. So if any industry, if they are enhancing their production or wanted to change their technology, or maybe if they want to expand the scope or area and so on, they have to obtain this prior environmental clearance and then initiate the work. And those projects which have initiated this without any prior environmental clearance, they are considered to be a severe violators of the law, and a severe punishment would be there under Environmental Protection Act. And the punishment will be not to the environmental managers or not to those implementing that environmental or other small works and so on. The punishment will be only for the project proponents who are proposing the project and constructing and owning the projects, whom do we call occupiers under this act. So these are the different kinds of all the projects which require prior environmental clearance under this notification was categorized under 8 project category types. All mining and extraction of natural resources processes. Extraction of natural resources processes include like hydel projects or use of coal for like thermal power plants, or oil explorations or gas explorations, and all these comes under this first category. And the second one is the primary processing of these natural resources, like coal washeries or mineral beneficiation plants and other things will come under the second category, wherein the natural resources get processed. So in certain. And third category is about the materials production of like metallurgical or cement and such other things which are required for, or maybe as steel beams and steel, all these things. And material processing could include leather tanneries or distilleries and something like that, all processing industries. And manufacturing and fabrication, which includes right from small automobile to several other sectors like distilleries, pharma, biomedical, and so something like that. And service sectors are those sectors which like roadways, ports, airports, hotels, and maybe other kinds of like pipelines or storage sectors. These will come under this 6. And infrastructure and environmental, again, environmental like biomedical waste management plants, effluent treatment plants, and power lines, and all these come under these 7th category. And buildings, construction of buildings larger than 20,000 square meters of area, or major constructions of commercial complexes or high-rise towers and so on, or area development projects like industrial estates, gated communities, townships, and all these things comes under 8th category. So if you go on like this, all these 8 categories together may have subcategories also in it. If you can see the environmental impact assessment notification of 2006, you can find an exhaustive list under each of these categories. And again, these categories, for the benefit of just appraising them or clearing them in a systematic way, they are categorized into broadly 2 categories, A and B category. But B category was again divided into 2 categories. A category are the projects which requires clearance at the national level. Say a big integrated project, or the sharp differentiation between A category and B category is, A category is a very large type of activity, and that requires a specialization committee should examine it. Say an integrated steel plant consisting of power production and steel processing and steel beams manufacturing and all these things, and maybe waste disposal mechanisms, and maybe coal washeries, and all these are together considered an integrated steel plant which requires a category. But as far as thermal power projects or river valley projects and all these things are such categories where, based upon their capacities and the types of influences, they were brought under the B category, which again can be cleared by a state level committee. So these are the 2 broad categories which we say A category and B category. And some industries, however small they are, like atomic related uranium mining, however small mine it is, it will go to the A category because it requires a specialized committee to process it. And similarly, a project just on the borders of 2 or more states, which can influence this state and the other state also. Maybe if both the states cannot agree, then it can go as an A category, even if its capacity is very small. So in this way, A category is a specialized committee clearance project at the national level, whereas B category projects, you have a state level committee. Before these committees that clear, you have these authorities also. A authority is the national level impact assessment authority, under which at the national level you have different committees for different project categories, like non-coal mining committee, river valley project committee, and then manufacturing and industrial committee. In that way, you will have a specialized committees, a nuclear radiation committee. In that way, the national level committees are specialized committees. The authority is one at the national level, but the committees are different. But at the state level, you have the state level authority is one, and state level committee also is one for all categories, because they are small, and the committee consisting of all these expertise, and then they will clear it. But some categories under B category, they don't require an exhaustive environmental impacts assessment. So they are cleared in a general sense with, so they will be given exemption for public hearing and so on. So I can explain this B2 category once we move on to the how this appraisal or EIA clearance process will initiate. First, whoever the project is being proposed, we call them a project proponent or the applicant. This project proponent, the Ministry of Environment has a standard format uploaded in the environmental clearance section, a link. They have to apply in that particular format, which is called Form 1. And this application first triggers this. That project could be, say, a mining project or a river valley project and so on. So what they have to do is they have to fill up this Form 1, and they have to show, right, these are the prospective sites where we are going to establish, and they have to give a pre-feasibility report, how this project will be implemented and what will be the benefits and how it is economically or environmentally or ecologically feasible. This is called pre-feasible report, and how the funds are generated, and all these things will be available in that. Along with this application will be made. And once this application is made, well, for all projects you need definitely a EIA consultant, because EIA is such an approach. It involves sociology, cultural, ecological, botanical, geological, geological, hydrological, engineering aspects, and physico-chemical aspects, chemical aspects, nuclear aspects. So all these will be there. So individual project proponent may be having all these expertise, but still a third party also is to join in designing this EIA study and EIA project. So this EIA consultant is to be appointed for these projects. Who are EIA consultants? There is one agency appointed by the Government of India, which is called National Accreditation Board for Educational and Training Institutions, which is called NABET, N-A-B-E-T. That NABET will accredit the environmental consultants. NABET will accredit environmental consultants, and only NABET accredited environmental consultants are to be appointed for the project. Again, NABET gives accreditation to these consultants depending upon their experience and specialization. Well, a NABET accredited consultant cannot hold all 8 types of categories of the projects. Maybe that consultant organization is accredited for mining and river valley projects, or some may be accredited only for pharmaceutical and synthetic organic ones. So in this way, NABET will accredit it, and those accredited consultants will prepare the detailed application to be submitted to the project proponent on behalf of the project proponent and submit to the EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment Authority or agency of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of Government of India. And authority receives this application, and then it will be sending it to the, the application is complete, it will be sending it to the Environmental Appraisal Committee, EAC. This is EAC. You can see from here again you have this EAC. And this EAC, Environmental Appraisal Committee, like the Environmental Impact Assessment Agency Authority, EAC committee is appointed by the Government of India by a Gazette notification, which consists of a chairman and a set of members up to 15 with different specializations, like a chemical engineer or an ecologist, a sociologist, an economist, and then maybe a chemist, a pharma one, a marine biologist, a marine engineer, and so on. This is where I am telling you some injustice is there in appointing these committees and so on for different types of projects, wherein you have more engineers than the scientists and the sociologists or the economists and the other aspects. It is not balanced. In this 15 numbers committees, if you have about some 10 or more of them are related to the engineering sector, and the remaining 3 or 4 are maybe a wildlife or this one, an economist or maybe an administrative and something like that. So this is a very imbalanced one in India, but they will ensure that this project requires this kind of impact assessments and then recommend to the consultant, you do this type of impact assessment and then conduct public hearing, share the impact assessment results and the management or mitigation plans you proposed with the public, and then come back to the appraisal committee. And based upon that EIA and EMP report, this appraisal committee will again recommend it to the environmental authority, which finally either issue clearance or reject clearance. So we have a wonderful law of organizing all these things. How these are to conduct and something like that. But each stage we have some strength and some weaknesses. Strength is you have a very good framework of doing things. But the weakness is at each stage, the ease and convenience of doing things are not defined. They are made at discretion of a few people. Like appointing the appraisal committee. You have only some 5 or 10 rules, but you don't have any specialized input of, right, for a river valley project, we require this combination. For a mining project, we require this combination. At the state level, since it deals with all general projects, we require this type of composition. So what has happened is, when these kinds of weaknesses are existing, the committee's composition was very weak. That's the reason this composition of the Environmental Appraisal Committee is the weakest link of the strongest chain. Right? You have a chain. All the links have the capacity to hold 10 tons of weight. And among all the links, except one link, which has a capacity of only 5 tons capacity, despite all the links are 10-ton capacity links, with the exception of this 5-ton link, the chain's capacity is limited to 5 tons only. So the weakest link is the strength of the chain, or as in the same way, the weakest link of the whole process is the composition, identification, and lack of rules to describe this composition is the weakest link in this entire process. This is where, again, academicians and teachers and human resources planning is required. We need to have a sociologist and economists and maybe the area specialist and construction engineers and several other people to come into this and with one voice should recommend, because now India is in a stage to revise this document. And similarly, imagine EIA consultants accredited by the NABARD. If you look at for the whole India, you have less than 300 members accredited by the NABARD for different types of projects. Not even as one for each district. And in every district, every month we are having some 10 or 15 projects, or at least 5 projects will come for clearing. If you look at the national level, despite 4 or 5 committees working on, every month some 100 projects, 100 to 150 projects are cleared. And for all these 100 or 150 projects, every month, only these consultants are doing, whether it is Arunachal Pradesh, or Kerala, or Kashmir, or Gujarat, Kutch region, or whatsoever it is. For all parts of the India, you have this less than 300 consultants doing these works. And imagine how much expertise we require for an India like this to make a meaningful impact assessment. And no consultant is very much free and do not have an official or expertise staff. Only with third-rated expertise staff they are working in. But you may ask me how NABARD is accrediting. I think that is where even NABARD's accreditation need to be scrutinized by the universities now. Whether the accredited experts are really experts in that field or not, or making or justifying their role or not, need to be scrutinized. I don't say it need to be a governmental scrutiny. A sociologist in our group can take up and say, right, these are the environmental management plans that were proposed by different types of NABARD accredited consultants. And these are the weaknesses and strengths of this sociology aspect of these EMPs. It could form a wonderful paper for a sociologist for his own credit, but it can go a long way in influencing the NABARD accreditation and EIA consultants' quality and EIA consultant methodologies and so on. So this is very much absent in India. Very few people are trying to assess how these NABET accredited consultants are working and of what quality they are submitting. This is one aspect I appeal to all my colleagues in the group. Just go to the Parivesh site of the Government of India, Ministry of Environment. You can find hundreds of environmental management plans approved by the Ministry of Environment and submitted, and you can obtain their copies. In that management plan, if you are a chemist, try to analyze what type of chemical aspects are involved in that EIA impact assessments and management plan proposed, and of what quality it is. Just make a study of these things and contribute so that it can go a long way and can influence. This is where our teachers, especially at the graduation and PG level, should rise to the occasion and influence it. So these will be the 5 phases of the environmental impact assessment. Screening, it's only about right, whether it requires impact assessment or without impact assessment. If it is a very small one, can go by a checklist. Or scoping is those projects which requires environmental impact assessment. The appraisal committee will give them, right, you have to study these aspects under hydrology. You have to study these aspects under geomorphology. These aspects you have to study under flora and fauna or biodiversity or ecology, or these aspects you have to cover under air, water, soil, cultural. In this way, they give a terms of reference for the EIA study, and giving the terms of reference to this impact assessment is called scoping. And after the project scoping is over, then the EIA consultant will conduct EIA studies there within a 10-kilometer radius of the project area, from the project area. Usually it would cover an area of 371 square kilometers of area or something like that. And in that, the consultant will study about the land use, what are the different kinds of projects, what could be the cumulative impact on air quality or water quality or the groundwater resources or the employment and the benefits and such things that they have to carry out. And in case if there are any adverse effects on the environment, and how those adverse effects can be mitigated, they have to prepare a plan under this environmental plan. After a plan is prepared, then he need to go to the public consultation, share with the public around. So this plan and draft and EIA need to be submitted to the Pollution Control Board, and they give a notice of 40 days for receiving objections, and then a public hearing was conducted, and with the minutes of the public hearing, the consultant and the proponent will go to the appraisal committee. That is called appraisal stage. So this is and it's usually this process, investor or the project proponent submission, from the date of submission, within 60 days, screening and scoping process and issue of these terms of reference should be over. So this is the sole responsibility of the expert committee and the authority. And then they prepare preliminary EIA report, investor and his environmental consultant. And there is no time limit for them because it is their own, because they have to fulfill everything. And once they are ready, and then they will come back for the public consultation. For public consultation, they will approach the State Pollution Control Board, and the State Pollution Control Board requests the district magistrate to conduct public hearing, and under the chairmanship of the district magistrate or his nominee, this public hearing will be conducted for the project. And the Pollution Control Board will prepare the minutes of the public consultation and then submit it to the appraisal committee along with the EIA draft approved. And the project consultant and the approval. This process of public hearing from the date of notification should be completed before 45 days. And after submission of the minutes of the public consultation, within 16 days, the appraisal committee should appraise the project and make recommendation to the regulatory authority, that is Impact Assessment Authority. After the recommendations, within 15 days, the authority should clear the project or reject the project, whatsoever it is. So once it is done, usually a process of nearly 180 days or a half year is there, but usually the average process time at the moment in India is about 1.5 years. Why? Because on one hand, you don't have a required expertise in processing all these within the time limits. And on the other hand, usually this process between scoping and going for public consultation, the environmental consultants will take a very long time here because their number is very limited. So what happens is then they usually apply late and then the rest of the process will get delayed. So in this way, it is statutory and exemption of what happens here is this statutory time framing and phasing and all these are good and so on, but here we need to consider one thing. Despite all these that we are going to have this for the past since 2006 to now 20, that's 4 years, almost 14 years of the revised notification. And since 94, that is 6 years, another 25 years of 26 years of experience we have here. But what is happening, whether in this 26 years of experience, could we see environment has improved? I think many of you will agree that in
No,
these
sir.
26 years, many ecosystems have been spoiled. Many water bodies were spoiled. Many cities or towns have lost their air quality. Deforestation has increased. And all this. Despite all the projects were given clearance and assuming that they are implementing the norms and so on. And when you go to the public and ask for it, public was not confident on the assurances given by the industry. Okay, even industry also was not happy with the present system because they are feeling that implementing environmental things are burdensome. And some of the conditions to comply with are very costly and expensive and required technical expertise. And some industries complain that even if we are implementing all those things, environment is getting spoiled, not just because of us, but because of some other thing. And regulatory authorities also say who will monitor these implementation processes at the state level. State Pollution Control Board and Ministry of Environment together should monitor it. And regulatory authorities like pollution control boards are not well equipped to monitor so many number of projects and industries. Every month we are giving about say 30 mines and 5 industries and 10 or 15 construction projects in the state. And PCB staff was very limited. And again, the major lacuna is once the environmental consultant gives the environmental clearance to the project proponent, he will not be there anywhere in the project implementation stage. So his accountability is lacking. His accountability is very important because based upon his own arguments, like an advocate believing, like a judge believing the advocate, the appraisal committee believes the consultant's arguments, and then his presentations, and then the data that they have submitted. So if those people lacks accountability, you can understand how the project's implementation will be. And so, and this is not my observation. There is an apex judiciary body called National Green Tribunal at the national level, which is next to the Supreme Court of India. Any environmental dispute or environmental violation can be taken up by NGT directly, whether it is at a village level or at the state level. One can directly approach the NGT. You don't need to go to the lower courts if it is an environmental issue on a specific industry or an environmental issue related to the public interest or whatsoever it is. But that National Green Tribunal itself 2 years back has given its observation about the EIA process, and it has directed several corrections to the notification given, and the notification was amended accordingly. And for more than 50 amendments were made in the last 14 years to the 2006 notification. And NGT has come to its notice several thousands of violations by the project proponents for not implementing the environmental conditions. And you can just remember the recent experience in Visakhapatnam, wherein LG Polymers, a multinational company, was operating then without environmental clearance for more than a decade in the heart of the Vizag city. And they were given industrial, and they are paying GST, sales tax, and all other taxes, and they are given some bank loans, and they are paying income tax, they are paying everything except environmental clearance, but the government has no means to identify the lacuna of it is not having without. It also has a pollution control board clearance for consent for operation, but not environmental clearance. So these are the things. Very few consultants, less than 300 in number, others the environmental without accountability. So these are the things that mainly spoiling the quality of our environmental impact assessments, and then it denied a good quality of environment to our future generations. If we goes like this for another 15 years, India is going nowhere. Definitely, with the kind of population we have, with the kind of limited resources that we have, if the teachers and the responsible people do not aware of come to the limelight and take up the cause, you cannot give good quality environment to our children. So, in short, this effectiveness of the present EIA, though it has its own strength in the framework, it has legally a paperwork is being done at the moment, and potential damaging impact on the environment are very frequently very shoddy and redundant and so on, and it has almost become like a table matrix, right? If you have a problem of air emission, right, install a scrubber to scrub the pollutant, right? If you have some water quality problem, right, install a sewage treatment plant. Recommendations are only up to that level, right? That industry will establish the sewage treatment plant or effluent treatment plant. But after establishing, there is no monitoring what quality of treatment is being done. So these are the things that are spoiling. And after NGT's intervention of so many amendments and so on, the government of India has planned to revise environmental impact assessment notification, and they have prepared a draft notification in early March last year, 2020, and invited comments, suggestions, and opinions on the notification, on that notification from the public. And the time was extended for several times, and officially now it was expired on August 11, 2020. But so far, no new notification was issued by the ministry, and thus I feel and I believe also that we still have some time for us, all the teachers, to make some comments on it after seeing that draft notification. And that draft notification, as many people argue, it was not very clear. As I understood, it was a more dilution of the present framework also. So they said that some strategic developmental projects, like a defense project, or a river valley project, or what you can call an atomic project, they are putting a strategic tag and saying that these projects shall not be placed in the public domain. If such projects like a nuclear power project, if it is not in the public domain, how people are ensured of the safety? Because these kinds of industries can have an influence of several hundreds of kilometers radius. So this is where the government has to ensure, and this is where legal specialist and the faculty of the law or faculty of the sociology or faculty of the politics and public administration should address how these kinds of introductions can help government or public or this one, or in otherwise what should it be, how can this be modified. And they have removed public hearing for several types of projects. So they say the public hearing is not required for all highway projects, or say, for instance, the recent controversy is a major highway is being laid all along the Western Ghats. And Ministry of Environment considers Western Ghats, along with the international community, that Western Ghats is a biodiversity hotspot. And climatologist says Western Ghats is the trigger and the attraction force of the southwest monsoons to India, and contributes to rainfall, and thereby several Indian rivers originate from the Western Ghats and flow along the subcontinent, peninsular. Despite all these, if you say that the road, the major highway that is being laid all along the Western Ghats doesn't require public hearing and so on, hundreds of communities dependent on the biodiversity of the Western Ghats will get affected. They should be given in a transparent way the confidence that this will not affect, and how they are going to do, and how they are going to, because rehabilitation is one of the poorest things as far as implementation part is concerned in India, which requires expertise of the sociologists, economists, NGOs, communities, and several other people. So in this way, there are lots of things that are dependent on the people are being denied. And also pipeline areas or borderline areas and so on, they are also have been exempted public consultation. All inland waterway projects or all expansion of widening of national highways and major rivers, all these require this one. And in another thing, some people argue the recent notification also opened as a window, but I don't believe it. But still, some people believe that the ministry has opened a window. Even those violating industries like the algae polymers of Visakhapatnam, which has operated without environmental clearance, can now disclose its violation and can now apply for clearance. And violator will only need 2 plans for remediation and resource augmentation. So what they should say is, because we have operated without AC and these are the things that have been damaged and we are paying compensation to this. And this damage assessment and to pay compensation, that is one aspect where it is a debatable one. A debatable one in the sense, how can you assess a damage caused to a water body? And how can you monetize it? If some fish are dead, you may say that, right, we will give you the cost of the fish. But the water has been polluted because of that poison, and you will be giving compensation to fish. But how to remove the poison? So it's a very complex issue for which so far there are no scientific and systematic operating procedures. And a very random or lay down a penalty per day of late clearance is imposed. And even Supreme Court order held that such clearances are contrary to the law. So that's the reason it's still under stay and something like that. And a violator public cannot complain the violations. If any violations are taking place, they have to be reported either by a government authority or the project proponents themselves or the project operators themselves. If a public complains, it can complain only to the Pollution Control Board, but they will not recognize it as violation. They go for examination and vigilance, and then they will try to establish it as a violation or not. So instead, the reliance is on the violators to disclose suo moto that they broke the law or something like that. So these are the things that are something alarming in the recent draft notification. And another aspect is, hitherto, all constructions or buildings of more than 20,000 square meters require environmental clearance. But now they have extended it to 150,000 square meters. So hardly very few projects will return. Now even a small construction along the coastline or maybe along the sensitive areas or in a forest region or maybe in a commercial slum area requires several angles to be looked into whether they require environmental safeguards or not. But now 150,000 square meters of this one is a very huge task, what we should say. So this is where again, so now what I mean to say is the major changes that dilutes, the major changes in the draft notification is these. Environmental permission is introduced instead of environmental clearance. Some can be directly given environmental permission without any appraisal of by the committee. And a technical committee at the apex level is formed to say whether this is required or not. And post facto clearance also is included. And for violations, industries can pay violation charges on daily basis and get away. Public hearing importance has been reduced. Construction projects are diluted. And in fact, we require changes in the composition of the appraisal committee and project-based assessments. However, it's not small or big projects. How important they are for the economy and for the culture and to the ecology. So that kind of categorization of projects is required. And how to ensure implementation after receiving the environmental clearance by the industries, and how the implementation, degree of implementation can be justified and reported to the public by the regulation authorities. These two are not there in any of the two draft notifications, 2006 notification or 2020 notification. And this is where for all of us teachers, we have to look how easily the implementation by the industry or the project proponents can be achieved. And this is where our duty is, help government to bring in a better EIA process, whether it is ecological or sociological or cultural or economic or chemical or biological or whatsoever it is. All of us need to work on it and speak frankly your view on the draft EIA. We do not say it should not be on the political basis or something like that. Remember that your grandchildren or future is involved in this. And if you have a very good observation of the draft notification, just place that observation in the Ministry Environment's website for this draft notification recommendations. And write these are the website EIA 2020, MOFCC and government if you send your observations, and these are the requirements that we require, or these are the requirements that institutions or teachers of colleges or universities required to adopt, you can fairly send, and it is our duty. In fact, it's not just my appeal, it's our duty under the Constitution, Article 21 and 58G. So I appeal to all my colleagues, please see that you can send, and if you want any further assistance, you can reach me to this mail, envirokamkar@gmail.com. Well, this is an official body that we are promoting to assist all the teachers and other public citizens, and to assist them in raising their voice to see a new course of environmental impact assessment procedure. So thank you. And now I'm going out of this presentation mode and coming back to you all. Now I invite any suggestions or comments or additions or questions to what I have said. We have still 15 minutes of time for a good interaction.
Sir, this is Dr. Ishwar Baitharu, sir. This was a very good, nice presentation, sir. Very informative, sir. I have few doubts that I need to clarify from you, sir.
Yeah, please.
What compelled the government to go for this EIA 2020? Was there any deficiency in the existing EIA regulations?
No, I think you must have seen the existing EIA. If it is effective, your environment should have been, if not deteriorated, at least it should have been good as it was in some 20 years back. How do you feel the environment around you, whether it is deteriorated after in these 20 years or is still like that only? Dr. Ishwar?
Sir.
I think it's you who have raised this question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. How do you feel your environment, whether it has changed to better or worse in these 20 years?
Sir, it has deteriorated significantly, sir.
Exactly. If our EIA policy is correct, if not any deterioration, we should have ensured at least the environment remains in that way as it was 20 years back.
Yes, sir.
But it hasn't. So that is the first indicator to say that EIA requires new inputs. And the second thing, I already raised this one. At the state level projects, clearances, the expertise required is not available in most of the states. And the expertise that they have chosen are based upon some purely bureaucratic norms and some framework like that, and not really all the types of expertise are drawn in.
Yes.
Like that, you can. I was in this appraisal committee for the last 6 years. And in our committee, we have about, it's a 15-member committee. We have about 8 engineers and 6 scientists and 1 government official, and no sociologist, no economist, no management specialist, and no industrial specialist.
Okay.
So you can understand how I perceive this one. But since this is not very transparent to all the faculty and the degree colleges and universities, this is not being understood very clearly. none of the board of studies or some people are introducing these topics in the environmental education part of those subjects, and also not raising with the government, where is a sociologist in your state level committee? If some university asks, right, then they will, at least for the next time, they will think of. And this is where we, the teachers, need to be open and frank. And in fact, after my advocacy, in fact, our committee has improved with a mining specialist, with a pharma specialist, and all that. But still, we could not bring, because of course they have a limited choice between 15. So depending upon the state, some states will have more pharma projects, like Andhra Pradesh. So we have a pharma oncologist and a chemist and something like that. Some states will have more mining projects. Some states will have more marine projects or river valley projects like Arunachal Pradesh. So depending upon that we need. But whatever the project is there, at least one sociologist and one economist must be there. But of the 30 states, I believe not more than 3 or 4 states have these aspects. And an ecologist or an environment should be there. But very few. That's the reason. Because that composition is to be strengthened. And then we can ensure a better state.
Sir, sir, why the technical reports that are in EIA are not made public, sir? Are they made public?
No. They are in the public domain.
Okay.
They are in the public domain. That's what I said. If you go to Parivesh site,
Yes, sir.
you will find the links for environmental clearance. And in that link, if you go to the projects issued environmental clearance,
Okay.
and you will be having a list of 1,000 projects or 200 projects or 500 projects, depending upon the state or nation. And for against that projects, you will have different files. This is the file of environmental clearance conditions. This is the file of environmental management plan that they have submitted. This is the pre-feasibility report that they have submitted. This is the topo sheet of it. This is the map of the area. This is the satellite image. All the links you will find there. Now they are in the public domain.
Okay, sir.
But only thing is, public is not aware of it. And nobody is asked to monitor them. And you do not know when they will again, after some 100 or 1,000 projects, they will remove some. Again, you cannot retrieve them. But surely, you can access at least 500 to 600 project reports submitted recently. I suggest you to go to those management plans.
Yes.
And whatever specializations yours are, look in that specialization way, first, and second in the overall quality aspects, and then write to NABET. Every management plan will have which NABET consultant organization have pursued it. If you feel that report is poor, write to the NABET. This consultant report is very poor in this the aspect of this thing. And you will find a particular consultant, say if it is me, Kameswar Rao consultancy. All the reports I have submitted will be almost similar wordings and cut and paste reports only. That you bring down to the NABET. That you bring down to the Impact Assessment Authority. And then these consultants should be careful. And imagine this number of consultants that for the whole India, 300, not even one for the district. That's the reasons for the poor quality, poor implementation, and poor monitoring. And this is where only teachers can do this.
Yes, sir.
No government employees, no consultants. no industries, and no other sector, but still lawyers can do it. But
Yes, sir.
lawyers can do it in both ways.
Sir, does EIA 2020 dilute the EIA existing EIA regulation, sir? Because it has been criticized in many parts.
Yes,
Did
yes.
it, so that the things that you are telling initially, that you are
Exactly.
environment is rapidly degrading. Under such a condition, why the government will go for a EIA, where the EIA is not becoming very stringent. Instead of becoming stringent, it is facilitating more deterioration of environments.
No, it is. We should think like this.
Sir,
Government wanted to do it best,
okay, sir.
but right, some experts have given that EIA 2020 draft, but that draft has been in. For that draft, government has invited comments, but all those who have responded to those drafts are, some of them are politically motivated, some of them are industry based, some of them are consultant based, but none from academic circle who can view it in a unbiased way. So unless the academic community, that's what I'm saying. If an NGO writes, and that NGO could be very biased by his organization and something like that, as you know, very few NGOs are unbiased. If an industry writes, they are industry biased. And if a bank writes, so it is the, but unfortunately, they have not invited from the, specifically from any category. But teachers, if we look at it, we can be most unbiased because we have nothing to do with all those things. And we can say, right, this is going to serve and this is not going to serve. And if right inputs are given to the government, and then they will think, right, okay, EIA, going for a good and stringent EIA is not cumbersome. Right? You have pollution control board. Imagine a city like Vizag or a district like Vizag, wherein you have at least 1,200 industries and mining projects to be monitored. In our pollution control board, Vizag zonal office, we have only 12 people to do it. Can they really do it?
No, sir, never. It's not possible at all.
It's not possible. So,
Yeah.
what could be the mechanism? Right, you have income tax department. For income tax, you will be disclosing, right, this is my income and this is something and this is this one. And so your return is taken. Given the large pool of income tax return submitters, they have a very less staff, but they rely upon the return that you have filed, and they randomly check. And if any violation is found, the punishment will be very heavy. So there are very proven models. The industries can be given the self-compliance. So how that self-compliance should be designed, that is again our role, experts and the teachers and the students of, right, in sociological aspects, self-compliance should be written in this way. So if we can observe those things and find some solutions and give it to them, government is ready to ease the making the monitoring mechanisms very simple.
Yes.
And at the same time, they cannot appoint one for each industry to monitor by the government. Government cannot pay in such a heavy way. Well, these models are existing elsewhere in developed countries like US and European countries and Australia and all the Scandinavian countries and so on. We can adopt it. Only thing is, we are always going for other types of models which are not or cannot be mimicable or achieved or realized or objects. So this is where we need to study and give good solution to it. My appeal is not to just make a comment on the draft, just to study these aspects. And this can give you an insight into this. And perhaps you may be able to give a good solution for one of those things.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yes.
Good morning, sir. Myself, Dr. Neeraj Jana Nekka from School of Life Science.
Please,
sir, I had query about what is the role of whether the People's Biodiversity Register can help in accepting or rejecting the industrial project in Gram Panchayat level, sir.
Biodiversity register is a valid document provided the Biodiversity Board has accepted it. So biodiversity register is a legal document under the Biodiversity Act. So if that particular project in any way is affecting the biodiversity aspects of that region, it can definitely that project need to give some remedy, or maybe it can be even rejected also if there is no remediation. Okay, yes, sir. You are right, Dr. Neeraj.
Sir, my next query is, while there is open cast mining for coal mining, then they are just clearing the vegetation and they are destroying all the woody vegetation and the wood logs and all that. In that, I think that all plant material. Is there any that nor the rules which will protect those and it will be utilized in other form?
Yes, Dr. Neeraj, you can ask that particular company for their EC. If they do not give, you can ask the Pollution Control Board to give it. And you can see those conditions that were imposed on them. And if they are violating any of the conditions, you can complain it to the PCB and also to the NGT.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, all the participants. I hope you, what I can say, support my cause of involving teachers and appearing. I think you have to respond, and maybe you can get back to me on the mail IDs that I have given. Thank you so much. And namaste.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar.
Esteemed resource person of the session, and my dear fellow participants. Myself, I am Dr. Kumar. I deem it a privilege to propose a formal vote of thanks for our esteemed resource person, Professor Kameswar Rao, for an extremely valuable lecture. Sir, on behalf of the HRDC Sambalpur University and we all participants of this refresher course, I express our heartfelt thanks for your insightful talk on the environmental impact assessment process. Your thoughtful presentation reminded us the crucial connection that exists between environment, humanity, and development. Perhaps in the mad rush for developmental projects, we very often forget the cost of environment. We are grateful to you, sir, for reminding us our responsibility on protecting the environment for generations to come. Thank you, sir, for introducing us with the existing legal provisions in India for making the proper balance between environment and development. Sir, we got immensely benefited from your thoughtful presentation on this very relevant topic, and we are looking forward to hear from you in many occasions to come in the future. Thank you so very much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Rajkumar. Thank you so much.